carbs are seen as the macro that makes or breaks a diet. Too little carbs, bad. Too many carbs, bad. Carbs at the wrong time, bad. They're just seen as the bad nutrient, the bad macro, the bad foods are carb-related foods. Or if you come from the running community, I believe, and I'll probably get shaded on this end, but I believe that carbs are almost over-worshipped in endurance sports. Yes, they're necessary, but at a point, I think we're using carbs as like this super shoe factor, and maybe it's just placebo, which is still fine. Again, if you feel good on high carb diet and you go run your PR, that's great. Then fuel how you want because it obviously worked, whether it actually did something for you or you just think it did something for you. Whatever it be, carbs are seen as either bad or they're still, even if you worship them in a way of performance, you still see them as kind of a stressful thing in your diet. I personally believe that with our diet, we don't have an overeating problem, whether it be carbs or any food. We don't have an overeating problem, we have a timing problem. And why I think this is that almost every overeating concern can be limited by just taking a breath and pausing in time, or finding the right time to eat. Let me explain this. So you eat dinner and you get done with your first plate, and instead of grabbing a second plate, you go for a walk. What does this do? It extends that period of time between you eating and you thinking you need more, and it allows the GLP-1 hormone, your leptin, to rise and get that signal to your brain. The reason you think you need seconds is because those hormones have not gotten to your brain to signal to your stomach that you're full, you're good. Going for a short walk after you finish your first plate will largely reduce the amount of times you think you need a second plate and then regret it later. Or just timing in general of timing your meals. So when you are going to have a strenuous workout, build your carbs around that workout. What are carbs? They are energy. So we want them to be used in a time when your muscles, your cells are needing energy. They're needing sugar pushed into them. A time not to eat carbs is right when you're about to go to bed and you're going to be idle and nothing's moving for the next 8 hours. So if nothing's moving, that blood sugar has to be lowered, which means the sugar and the glucose have to be pulled out of your bloodstream and put somewhere. If it's not a muscle that's crying out for it, it's a fat cell. So again, we don't have an overeating problem. I think we have a timing problem. We need to slow down, enjoy the meals we have, give ourselves time to think, do I really need more? And we also have a timing problem in the sense of we just need to get better at when we're eating, not at 8 a.m., noon, and 6 p.m. when the world tells us to, but eating when our bodies say we need to eat, whether that be 2 p.m., whether that be 4 p.m. for a one meal a day, whether that's 6 a.m. if you got a big workout, or 4 a.m. if you're hitting a 20-miler at 4 a.m., whatever it be. We have to break out of this stigma of our diets have to be one size fit all or macros built by the calculator on your phone, and truly just asking yourself, what does my body need and when does it need it? The main point of this episode is that I don't want you to see carbs as bad. Instead, I want to zoom in on carbs, specifically some good whole food sources of carbs, and help relieve some of that stress around eating carbs and balancing them with your activity, with your diet, and putting them in a maximum potential place where they can produce the most amount of benefit for you and they're available at just the right time. That is solving our timing problem and solving our carb problem. That's the goal of today. This strategy is called Carb Retrogradation, or that's really just a fancy way of saying cold potato, which has resistant starch. So, how does this work? When you cook food, think of what the molecules are doing. So go back to your physical scientist, your chemistry days. When molecules are heated, they start speeding up, and then they kind of get closer together, but they loosen up. So when you heat water, when you heat ice, it turns into water. It loosens up and it fills more volume. As you cook food, the same thing is happening. Those molecules are heating up, they're spreading out, they're getting broken down, which would make it easier to digest them. That is why cooking vegetables. Cooked vegetables are softer, meaning that they're easier to eat, they're easier for your body to break down. Same thing happens when you cook grain. The body can then immediately break it down into glucose, into energy, put it in the bloodstream. Insulin sends that into your muscles, and it's energy right there. That's what cooked rice, cooked potatoes, cooked pasta does for you. That is why you get that blood sugar spike when you eat carbs. But when you cool them down, you put them in a glass container in your fridge. That's another side tangent. Don't use plastic and put hot food in it. Use glass containers. It's so much better for you. When you cool down that starch, being rice, being potatoes, and you put them in a glass container and you put them in your fridge for the week, what happens overnight or over days is that those starches, the molecules, tighten back up. So you had a hard grain of rice that you boiled, used your rice cooker, you cooked it, you softened it, and then you put it in the fridge overnight, over days, whatever it be. That's why you get like stickier rice. It's no longer as soft or as fluffy as it was when you first cooked it. It's a little bit tighter and it's a little bit more like it has that glutinous like texture to it a little bit. It cools down and it starts to form these crystal-like strings. The crystals literally start to attach to each other and form these structures that are crystalline in a way. Maybe I'll put a picture up right here to show you what they look like. What happened while that rice was cooling was that it changed. So you had the cooking process, you have the cooling process, and here's how it changed. Your body can't break down those crystal chains as fast or at all sometimes. So what has happened, the name resistant starch comes from the fact that your body now resists digesting them. They become fiber, essentially skipping your small intestine, going straight to the large intestine, getting converted into fermented butyrate, fermented other particles that then feed your gut microbiome the same way fiber does and helps sweep out the system rather than just dumping glucose into your bloodstream. That change is that these resistant starches, these carbs that you just ate, same as you always do, eating them cold, or we'll cover, you can actually reheat them. The same thing happens. It now became fiber sweeping through your intestines rather than just blood sugar spikes. When you consume them, so you had your rice, you cooked it, you cooled it down, now you're going to consume it. If you don't like eating a cold sweet potato like an apple, that is honestly my favorite thing ever. You can call me weird, but cook a sweet potato, put it in the fridge, eat it like an apple. It's so good. Reheating the food keeps most of the crystal resistance the same. So even if you don't want to eat cold rice, cold potato, reheating it keeps this structure the same. It doesn't ruin the resistant starch. So you can warm it back up in a dinner pan or a frying pan. Don't use the microwave. Another side note, I'm just anti-plastic containers and microwaves. I do use them, but I try to limit them as much as possible. But then you can reheat your rice and your potatoes and your protein and then your other, like some vegetables, some macro ingredients. You can reheat them in a pan and eat them. And it still helps you resist that sugar high and that carb crash that you would get from just eating regular cooked carbs. So we had the cooking process, we had the cooling process, we had the changing, that's 3 C's. We had the consuming, that's the 4th C, and now we have the catalyst. So what happens after your body starts breaking down as much as it can that resistant starch? The catalyst part is that the intact starch, again, passes through your small intestine. It's too dense, it's too tightened in that crystal structure that your body, your enzymes can't break it down in the small intestine the same way it would of a cooked rice, and it passes through your small intestine into your large intestine where it starts feeding trillions of your good gut microbiome, and it turns that into fuel, releasing the helpful shorty chain fatty acids like butyrate. And butyrate is this fatty acid chain that helps fight cancer. It helps lower inflammation, which then leads into all these other things. It's one of the things that can help fix leaky gut syndrome, which is just another problem with digestion when people's guts aren't healthy. It helps fix all these things. So the health benefits of eating resistant starch, eating these cooled, after being cooked starches and carbs, is that it lowers the effect on your blood sugar. So again, when you eat just rice hot, first time you cook it, it gets digested right away. It sends glucose into your bloodstream, which is great if you're going to go do something right then. But if you're not, insulin then takes that glucose out of your bloodstream because it's got to lower your blood sugar, and it has nowhere to put it other than fat cells. If you're eating carbs around your workout, your muscles are wanting that carb. It's wanting that energy to help rebuild it. And so then the insulin can digest it, your pancreas releases it, and it pumps that glucose into the body parts, into the cells that need it. So that's sort of where that timing comes into play again. If you have too much glucose in your bloodstream and your muscles and your cells aren't wanting it, meaning you didn't stress them out, you didn't go get a workout in, it just puts it into some fat cells. The next reason it helps your health is for better gut health. We talked about this. As these tough crystalline structures pass through, they can't get digested by your enzymes in the small intestine. They go to the large intestine. The chemical change that happened when you cooled the rice, you cooled the potato, it then allows your body's enzymes not to break it down, but to move it through the entire intestine completely unchanged, meaning that it's sort of, I say sort of in quotes because this isn't really true, but if it becomes like fiber, it's almost like a 0-calorie carb. That's not true, but you can think of it as a better carb because it's almost like your body, again, is resisting part of it. What does this lead to? As your body can't break it down in the small intestine, you're also fuller because, 1, fiber fills you up. 2, it's being digested slower. If you slow down the digestion, your body feels fuller and more satiated. A 2010 study that I read, take this with a grain of salt because it's a very minimal impact, but it had found that of the men who ate resistant starch potatoes, meaning cooked and then cooled potatoes, they then ate 100 calories less per meal, meaning that their calorie deficit was increased by eating the resistant starch because they felt fuller. They didn't need to eat as much to be satiated. Okay, so we've talked about the how. How does this all work with resistant starch? Now the what. I've mentioned most of the main sources of resistant starches, but it also includes green bananas, legumes, cashews, bread, and oats. The highest sources are rice and potatoes. Oats and green bananas and plantains lose their starch when cooked. So these are sources, the green bananas, the plantains, and the oats, that you actually want to eat raw. And when I mean raw, resistant starch comes from uncooked and unripe foods. That is why it's green bananas. Green bananas have a higher concentration of potassium, and they have more of these resistant starches. And we're going back to the fruit episode. I have preferences that most people don't, and I think green bananas are better. Yellow bananas are just too far gone for me. I always eat my bananas when they're green because they have a little bit more of that like tangy flavor that is good. I feel like you taste more banana in a green banana than you would not. And this is just helping me prove that you should do what I do. Also, oats. That's another weird one. Everybody cooks their oats. It's not, the resistant starch is harmed in an oats when you cooked it. It's different than the rice and the potatoes. When you cook the oats, the resistance crystalline structure actually drops. So do overnight oats. Just soak the dry oats in some water or some milk. Or I like using oats literally just as like cereal on top of my yogurt bowls. It's crunchy, or mix it in with some berries, some cottage cheese. I think oats are a great substitute for like granola because just the dry oats have the crunch to them without all the sugar, and it's so easy to just dump some oats for an easy carb source. And again, resistant starch, another reason to do it. Another type of the resistant starch, so those are the unripe examples. These are the uncooked examples. So the examples that you cook and then you cool them. Cooked rice has been cooled, has a higher resistant starch than rice that is not cooled after being cooked. Beans, same way. Soak your beans, cook your beans, let them cool. I think butter beans, lima beans, I think is the more commonly used name. They're the highest source of resistant starch. So how can you add resistant starch to your diet? The FDA recommends 10 to 15 grams of resistant starch. Guys, even I was not hitting that until I dove more into trying to. But the beautiful thing is that 10 to 15 grams of resistant starch contributes to your fiber intake, which should be 30 to 40 grams anyway. So if you can get the resistant starch in, you're already halfway to your other fiber intake. Then you just throw in some more fruits and vegetables, and you're going to be cruising on the FDA standard. So try cooking rice, potatoes, beans, pasta. I am not a pasta person, so you will never hear me talk about pasta, but I know for most people that is probably more preferred than potatoes and rice. So pasta is the same way. Cook the pasta and then cool it. Again, eating it cold would be best, like in a pasta salad or something, but you can also then reheat it. The whole point here is that just meal prep your meals. That makes this really easy. You cook one time a week, you let it cool naturally because it's a meal prep, and then you heat it back up in a pan, and you're set. It's okay to reheat the starch before eating. Reheating doesn't decrease the starch of resistance very much, or in a monumental amount. In place of cooking your oatmeal, try uncooked oats soaked in yogurt, milk. I just do water for my overnight oats, and then a scoop of protein for some flavor or some honey. Or the last example is just add some lentils in. So lentils like chickpeas or barley is another good source. Add those into your soups or your cold salads, like your pasta salads. I also wanted to just give you some actual numbers for how these different starches do serve you and how much resistant starch is in each of these sources. So this is coming from Harvard Health, if I would stop having pop-up ads. So in a 100-gram portion of this ingredient, this is how many grams of resistant starch there are. So in lima or butter beans, there's 6.4 grams of resistant starch in that 100-gram portion. Kidney beans, black beans, lentils, those are all at about 3 grams per portion. Breads, which we're going to go into more of. Sourdough bread and rye bread, so think the better for you breads that have more grains, more multigrains to them, they're at about 3 grams of resistant starch as well. Unripe banana and plantains are at about 3 grams. Barley is the highest grain source at 3.4 grams per 100 grams of serving. Pasta, rice, they both sit at about 1.5 grams of resistant starch, and then oats are at 1 gram. Corn is another one. It's a lower concentrate of resistant starch, but corn is the same way. So a corn tortilla. Potatoes, a russet potato is the best. It has about 4 grams when you cook it and then you cool it. Red potatoes are slightly lower at 2 grams, and a sweet potato is about at that 2 gram space too, but a sweet potato has some added benefits. We talked about it with the carotenoids. They have that orange color, and so they have some other benefits to them as well. So sweet potato is my preferred potato for resistant starch, especially because they're good to eat cold because they're almost a dessert, especially if you drizzle them with some honey and then put some cottage cheese on top. Man, that is baller. Sweet potato parfait is what I call it, and you can tell me I'm weird. I don't care. I enjoy it. So those are some main sources. I want to dive deeper into a couple. So rice is my go-to just because it's cheap, it's easy. I think I'm going to start migrating towards some more potatoes, and I'll cover why I'm going to do that. But bread is an interesting one. I actually didn't know that this was a resistant starch just because bread is something we all just label as bad. But I am a sourdough bread baker now. I do love keeping my sourdough starter and treating it like a member of my family. And so as I started baking sourdough bread, we know sourdough bread is better because the naturally fermenting yeast in it means that it's almost pre-digested for you. So the fermentation process means that food is pre-digested for you. So sourdough bread is better for you because it has some components of being pre-digested, meaning your body won't have to work as hard to break it down. It also it results in a lower spike of your glucose, which is why sourdough bread is better than just the gross store-bought bread that you can buy. The bread has resistant starch when you cool it or freeze it due to the same process of retrogradation or resistant starch creating. When starches like wheat flour are cooked with moisture, they gelatinize and become more digestible. So think of freshly baked bread. It is kind of squishy, kind of like a sponge. Like you can press it and it won't always bounce back. A process called retrogradation begins when you cool it. During retrogradation, some of the starches realign and form the crystalline structures, and that makes it more difficult for the body to digest and absorb. The starches are resistant to digestion, hence the name resistant starch. Because less of the carbohydrates in the bread are being absorbed, the impact on your blood sugar is reduced, effectively improving the glycemic effect of the bread. Following the retrogradation process, toasting or reheating your bread maximizes these glycemic effects. That reheated slice ends up with more resistant starch and a lower glycemic impact than when it was freshly baked. This means that as a result of this process, freezing and then toasting the bread slows down how quickly your bread can turn it into sugar. Meaning that when you don't just eat the fresh baked bread, but you actually freeze it or cool it down and then toast it again, it not only lowers the blood sugar effect, but it also increases your satiety. Sourdough is, again, created through natural fermentation, giving it a leg up nutritionally by producing acids like lactic acid and acetic acid, resulting in a lower pH. Not only does this slow gastric emptying, which means if it's not leaving your gastric system, you'll be fuller longer, but it also slows the absorption of the carbohydrates into the bloodstream, reducing the glycemic effect of bread. This is a direct quote from the article I read. I will link it below. The fermentation process also helps break down some of the fructans, which is a type of sugar in wheat. Fructans are a type of FODMAP, which are fermentable carbohydrates that cause some individuals' digestive systems when consumed in excess. This is why most people will say they're gluten intolerant. By breaking down some of the fructans, sourdough bread may cause less digestive symptoms than other bread. So if you struggle with bread, I was like this. My stomach used to hurt all the time when I would eat bread or pasta, but sourdough bread didn't have the same effect. One, probably some placebo in my head. I was making it. I had to like it. Two, it's better for you in the digestive tract. There is also potential for increased bioavailability of the nutrients in sourdough bread. Wheat contains phytic acid, which can bind to essential minerals like iron, zinc, and magnesium, preventing their absorption in the body. The fermentation process of sourdough bread can help degrade some of these phytates, making the minerals more available to be absorbed in the digestive tract. So, if you zoned out, zone back in, I'll recap it for you. Sourdough bread is better for you because it's pre-digested and it's fermented, which means your body can break it down easier with less digestive symptoms and with less of a glucose spike. It's also good because the nutrients produced in this fermentation process can bind to the bread better than if you're just eating gross sourdough or gross plain wheat bread from the store, because that sometimes with the preservatives just doesn't do well with helping iron and zinc and magnesium absorb into the body. And interestingly enough, I don't think people often think about freezing their bread, but this is showing that when you freeze the bread, which is totally fine, like you can totally do that. It's better to do that with homemade bread, and then you re-toast it, which again, I'm weird, but I think this is good. Like freezing a piece of bread and then re-toasting it, it has a crispier texture, but then the inside stays softer. So you have to try it with a good thick piece of homemade sourdough. It's good, but freeze it and then toast it, and it combines two digestive friendly hacks, meaning fermentation and resistant starch. That means that you have better blood sugar regulation, less bloating, and more stable energy in a piece of bread, which is largely seen as like the devil of any diet. So I think you should try that. Again, let me rephrase and say that store-bought bread or store-bought of any of these is going to be worse, because any preservative that is put into making your bread last forever, or making your rice already be able to be used in a bag and you just heat it up in the microwave, or even potatoes, buying like a potato salad. Anything put in there that is a preservative, like xanthan gum or glucose preservatives or just salt and vinegar, whatever it be, those are going to counteract some of that resistant starch building up, which means you should just cook your own and then enjoy it, because cooking your own will automatically, again, I just told you about the sourdough. When you cook it yourself, you'll enjoy it more because you put in the time and effort to do it. So homemade is the name of the game. Boil your own potatoes, cook your own rice, chill your own overnight oats, play with some fun flavors, or just eat them dry like cereal. It's actually not as bad as you think it sounds. Eat a green banana, because all these benefits All these health benefits will be found at their greatest use when you're doing the cooking yourself. My last note, so we dove into bread and how sourdough bread would be great. And if you need some sourdough bread, I know a girl, or I'm sure you know a person. It's not a very, it's a very common thing now for some middle-aged 22-year-old girl in your life to be making sourdough. Guarantee it. Potatoes. This is an interesting one for me because potatoes have largely blown up as being a source for runners while they're running. And you're thinking, that sounds insane. But I think the first person I saw do this was Courtney DeWalter. And she had bought on Amazon like little soft gel packets that were reusable. And she put mashed potatoes in them. And that was her fuel for these ultra marathons that she was winning and running really fast in. And I would have said it sounded crazy, but I've met some more people who just recommend different carb sources when they're running, and potatoes are a whole food, which makes me feel better. I hate taking the gels when I'm in my marathons because they're not real food. There's maltodextrin in them. There's sugar. They work. They get you to run fast, but I don't feel great when I have to take the gels. But mashed potatoes might be the move, and here's why. A few stats to show you why potatoes and the resistant starch nature of them being cold is so good for you. They're easy to digest. You don't have some GI issues, which happens when people take the high sugar options of the gels or the goos. You don't have a drop in energy as much as you do when the goo finally runs out and that sugar is emptied from your bloodstream into your muscles because you're running. It's a complex whole food carb option, meaning it'll keep you fuller longer and produce that energy for a more lasting period of time. They're filled with potassium, more than a banana even, I believe. I believe a russet potato has more potassium than a banana. It has vitamin C, it has magnesium, it has fiber, which might be the only downside, but you could take off the skin. This would be an example of when you could take the skin off of the potato because you don't want fiber when you're running. That's a no-go. And they're just cheap. These gels that I'm buying are like $2.25 a pop. And a potato, I could get like 40 gels out of a bag of 5-pound potatoes. And it might look gross when I'm running a marathon and sucking down mashed potatoes, but if it worked for Courtney DeWalter, I bet it would work for me. And in case I haven't convinced you to think about potatoes as a pre-workout, a post-workout, here's some more stats. 26 grams of complex carbohydrate, more of several essential vitamins and minerals than spaghetti, brown rice, or whole wheat bread are in one potato. There are 620 milligrams of potassium. Potassium aids in muscle, cardiovascular, and nervous system function, especially during long endurance events, but also during weightlifting, resistance training. Resistant starch can aid you in your resistance training. They have about 110 calories for energy, meaning these are just straight, clean energy. And it's about 110 calories for the same size of what one of our gels would be, which matches. The gels are usually 100 calories for like 25 grams of carbs. 27 milligrams of vitamin C in a potato, which is 50% of the very low daily recommended value. It's also more vitamin C than most vegetables that you would think of eating for vitamin C. There's vitamin B6, which helps make the body's amino acids and helps regulate your energy metabolism and your iron function. We talked about B a while ago with the carotenoids. It has 2 grams of fiber, which is great for cholesterol. It also is great for digestion, but again, while you're trying to work out, fiber might not be the move. And what the potato offers perhaps the most of that a gel or a goo or chews won't is some protein. It's not a lot, but it is some protein, and I can guarantee you there is 0 protein in the gels I'm taking. And protein aids in muscle recovery. So what are we doing when we're running marathons? We're breaking down our body. What are we doing when we go to the gym? You're breaking down your body, and protein is queen of helping you rebuild. So if the potatoes can offer some protein that rice or bread or the sugar gels can't, that's where a potato can come in and be better for not only fueling the workout, but fueling the recovery. And if you can do 2 in 1, that's great. So we talked a lot about resistant starch. And if you've not cared about any of the stats, any of the health benefits, here's something you do care about. It is beautiful that the things that God put on this earth to grow out of the ground and produced himself, meaning that we were once gardeners in the garden and that was our only job to do, and potatoes may have been there. And now potatoes are a natural source of energy and recovery that don't need a whole lot of work. And in fact, you can mess with them once a week. On a Sunday, you can cook a whole bunch of potatoes, chop them up, put them in your glass containers, add a side of ground beef or some chicken, or if you're bougie, some like bison, that would be good. And then just reheat them throughout the week, and you have a beautiful whole food based meal that is going to fuel you to have the energy you need to do and not store around any of the excess energy that you don't need. Or add in a bunch of preservatives and crap that you don't need in your body. Potatoes, rice, green bananas, oats, these are simple foods provided to us by the Creator to fuel life down here and have some fun. And I think when you're eating whole foods, you feel like a whole person. You feel complete and you feel full and satiated and like you can conquer the world. And that's the goal. And if resistant starches are aiding not only in that energy production, but also in cleaning you out, cleaning the bad stuff out, that's just a double win. I mean, you're getting good stuff in, you're getting the bad stuff out, all because you took a time in your week to prep once and eat throughout it. The last pitch for meal prepping, potatoes or rice or pasta, if you enjoy pasta, is that when you cook once a week, you no longer have to ask what's for dinner. What's for dinner is such a modern problem. People back in the day, before we had grocery stores down the street and fast food around every corner, people didn't ask what's for dinner. They ate what they could find. They ate what they could catch or harvest from their own backyards. It was never a question of what's for dinner. It's how can we make this dinner great with the people we're at? It was how can I change this meal just slightly so that the people around me can enjoy it. So, meal prep, capitalize on the resistant starches, and you'll never struggle with the question of what's for dinner again. And it's okay to eat the same thing over and over and over again. Your body likes that. You can always spice it up with some sauce or some different seasoning, but your body likes consistency. And when your diet is consistent, it'll be a lot easier to make exercise consistent, make being with your family consistent, make sleep consistent, make you consistent. And I think consistency is one of the undervalued beauties and strengths of a human being. So, your caveman ancestors would be proud of your chicken, rice, and broccoli day in, day out, or whatever it be for you. This week, starve the lies, build your body, fortify your mind, stay hungry, eat some cold potatoes or rice or pasta, whatever it be for you. And guys, always stay unsatisfied. See you next week.